here I am, doing a podcast. Never wanted to, never thought I would. It's not in my wheelhouse. I don't like the sound of my own voice, but here I am, sitting here with Minh Swenson, Los Angeles' favorite photographer, at least in the art scene. Let's see what he has to say. Let's see who he is. Let's follow his journey. Enjoy. Eric, so you started taking... No, let's not do that. You do your own story. Eric, how did you end up in LA?
So I ended up in LA on September 11th, the weekend of the terrorist attacks. I was living in San Diego 3 years prior, and I basically grew up in San Antonio, Texas, and it was my dream to eventually end up in Hollywood. So I had my college years throughout Utah, those years, and then I moved to San Diego, the late 90s, and then worked my way to Los Angeles.
And what were you doing before you came to Los Angeles?
In what period?
Like right before you got here. Like what?
So I had finished film school in Utah, then I moved to San Diego around 98. My sister was living there, and during that period I was writing a bunch of screenplays, hoping to eventually sell one and become like the next Tarantino or the next Spielberg or something like that, because I was really into cinema. That was my main passion.
Well, you still are. You're still into cinema.
Oh yeah, prior, during that period I like I said, finished film school. I grew up in the 80s, and my dream was to be in Hollywood, and I just loved films. I was surrounded by friends who loved films. And so in those late 90s, during those San Diego years, prior me coming to Los Angeles, I was writing a bunch of screenplays and hoping that eventually I would come and sell what at that time was the $1 million spec script, which was the popular thing at the time. And that's essentially what I was doing during those years.
Okay, so then you moved to LA.
Yes.
What's your first job in LA?
Well, I had a few different jobs. I was always doing the photography side projects because that was what I was doing since basically high school. I was shooting occasional weddings or events, and I was shooting people's headshots, stuff like that. At a certain point, I worked at a frame store because I had that frame. I had the background of framing from working with my father in his gallery in Colorado, so I knew a bit about framing. He had his own gallery, and
what type of gallery?
The gallery that he had was called Gallery 145. It was in Dolores, Colorado, and he lived in a two-story place on the main boulevard, and he had his private quarters on the second floor, and on the other side of the building was the guest house where I would stay when I visited, and down below was his gallery and darkroom, and he had a place where he would cut his own mats and develop his own photography. And so the gallery was his photography. And so during all those many years hanging out with him, I would do my own photography with him, and we'd go on trips together. And then we would return from our trips, whether it be a day trip or a weekend trip. On some occasions, we would take off for like a whole week. This is the course over many, many years of visiting him. And then we would return from these trips, and he would get up at 5 a.m. and develop all the film, which would be my film and his film. And then I would wake up, usually to the sound of a thumping from him below, knocking on the ceiling right under my bed to wake me up, because he was in the Marines, and the Marines, like, they wake up really early. So I would wake up to the sound of this thumping, and I would get all excited, and I would run down to the dark room so I could see the negatives that he had processed earlier in the early morning. And then I would just basically mentored by him by through all these many years of being in the darkroom and also cutting mats and framing his photography. So I had that background. So one of my first jobs in Los Angeles was working as a custom framer. And then,
so you must have saw some interesting art, good art, bad art. What did you see? Like when you were framing?
well, basically, I only saw his art, his photography, and he was like my mentor. So I thought it was incredible and amazing to go on these trips with him and then see through his eyes of him capturing these photos and then eventually getting processed through the darkroom and then printed from an enlarger and then matted, then framed, and he would sign them. So I saw the whole process over a decade or two, and then it got to the point where I wanted to do the same thing. So that was my exposure initially to a gallery.
So your photography isn't necessarily, like we joke all the time that it's an addiction. It's not really an addiction. It sounds like it's just a way of life.
Yeah, I was essentially doing photography since I was 16. My parents had divorced when I was 8, around that time. And I grew up in San Antonio, and he had a full career in the military. He was an officer in Vietnam, and that's where he met my mom. And then when he retired...
Wait, so your dad's American?
Yeah, my dad was a Scandinavian American from Colorado. And then he went off, joined the Marines when he was 18. He was in Korea as a Marine. Then he eventually transferred to the Army. And then in Vietnam, he was an officer. But during all those years, he was doing photography, like photojournalism. And so he was doing photographies at an early age. So when he essentially married my mom and then moved to Hawaii, where he was his last post, and then where he retired, he started a career as a photographer there. And then he ended up answering an ad in the paper for a photography position in San Antonio. So he moved there, and that's where I was raised, and my sister was born there in San Antonio. So when he was in San Antonio, he eventually had a commercial photography. He was a commercial photographer. So that was his second career. And then when I entered my high school years, he moved back to... My parents had divorced when I was around 8. So around my high school years, he moved back to Colorado and started a third career as a fine art photographer, along the lines of Ansel Adams and the F-64 photographers. All right. The West Coast black and white photographers, landscape, stuff like that.
Okay, so then you let's back up now. So it's where you grew up. It's your childhood. You're in move your phone. You're in San Diego. You come to LA. You start wanting to do scripts. What transition that, like, okay, that's it, I'm just going to go for the arts? Like, what happened?
Okay, I think you should get a little closer.
Oh.
Okay.
Well, start that again.
Sure.
Okay, so you were San Antonio, you went to college, you're in San Diego, you end up in LA, you have had multiple jobs in the arts background or art adjacent. How did you end up photographing all of these artists that you've accumulated? Galleries, artists, events. What was the pivotal point in that change?
Well, essentially, growing up, I was always into art, photography, cinema, and then I got into poetry, stuff like that. So I was always into visual arts since at an early age. So when I arrived to Hollywood in 2001, like I told you, I came here during that weekend, that crazy weekend. I was hoping to shop around these screenplays and kind of start my career that way. But what happened around 2003, they started coming out with Panasonic started coming out with these prosumer film cameras video cameras that would shoot in 24p. So you had this look, when you shot these videos, they would look like cinema. So I invested into one of those film cameras, and I was surrounded by a bunch of friends who were improv artists or improv actors, and I would go to their improv shows and their improv contests, stuff like that. So I invested in that camera, and then I started filming my friends. And then I came up with an idea to shoot 3 films, feature films, starring my friends. 2 of them, which are on YouTube. However, I did those 3 films in 04 and 05. And then from there, YouTube came into our life, and then I started shooting music videos for people that were giving me music for those 3 films.
Oh. Did they pay you?
Well, you had to kind of prove yourself at first, so I can't really remember. It's kind of foggy at this time.
You've kind of mastered that whole not paying to get work.
When I edited these 3 films, it taught me how to edit. And so I took those skills and I started applying them to music videos. So I started off shooting some music videos and kind of getting some of those in the can and posted to YouTube. And then from there, I started generating paid work. So I did that for like 3 to 4 years. I was shooting just hundreds and hundreds of music videos.
But when did you start going to galleries?
So during the period from 05 to 010, I got a girlfriend. We lived together. So I had this domesticated relationship. And so I was looking for things for us to do. So we started off by going to like the LA art show. And I would walk around and put myself on every email list at every gallery there. And so then I started getting the invites to the openings from the emails.
Smart.
So then her and I started going as like a kind of a cheap date night, go to some art openings. And this is kind of around the time when Culver City was going off. I remember like the first gallery I was going to was Billy Shire. And I thought it was kind of cool. And then I would go down the street to Jack Rutberg, and there was always these huge crowds. And so I would take pictures here and there. Not a big deal.
Is this pre-Instagram?
Yeah, this is way pre-Instagram. Okay. This is like MySpace era. Okay. This is okay?
Okay.
So it wasn't like social media was a thing at this point. But I was just taking pictures because I was taking pictures everywhere I went in life anyways. So it got to the point where like, hey, I kind of enjoy this. This is kind of cool. Well, eventually in 2010, we broke up and I was on my own. So I started doing this full time. I started going to art openings. And this is the time when Facebook came into our lives. And then I started seeing some people that were posting on Facebook and encouraging me to post on Facebook. So I started going to these openings and taking pictures.
And this is like, digital film by then, right?
Yeah, this is. Yeah. I was shooting pro style photos on a Canon, and I would run home, download them to the computer, and have them posted that night. Pictures from these certain galleries. And I would tag as many people as I could. So that was like the beginning.
It's a good hustle.
Me tagging everybody. And then that I think started the addiction of the social media addiction because I was tagging everybody. And that put me on the map very quickly within that year of like I was the guy that was at the openings. Remember around this time the LA art scene was much smaller than it is now.
And less accessible.
Yeah, so I was, and then I had people recommending, go shoot this gallery, go shoot this artist. And then I started doing the films for my YouTube channel. And I was being, go film this artist, go film that, so I started filming.
Now, are you doing this for free or are you charging?
Well, back then I was like, not charging. But then, sooner than later, people started paying me because what happened was I had a website that marketed all my music videos. So then I created a separate page on my website for film documentaries. And I had already done a few films on my father, his photography. So I started posting those onto YouTube and putting those on the website. And what happened is I started accumulating all the emails. I created my own list of galleries. And then one day, I sent out this blast to all the galleries and soliciting my services as this video filmmaker who can make and produce a short video of your exhibition or artist or whatever, and I could post it onto YouTube. And one of the things that inspired this was because I was like a film junkie, that also made me like a documentary film junkie. So I would go onto Amazon and I would search for like documentaries on artists that I liked, like David Hockney or even Ansel Adams and on. And there was so at that time there was a huge lack of these documentaries. So I kind of felt like I could fill this void and start shooting documentaries and start a business and a career. So I sent that email blast, and there was one guy who replied to me like literally the next day. His name was Jack Rutberg, and he was one of the guys that was like the early mentors for me, who allowed me to come into his gallery and basically do carte blanche films on his artists and exhibitions. And then it got to the point where he started paying me. And so if you go to the YouTube channel and you look up Jack Rutberg, there's probably going to be around 30 of these films over the course of many years. And then, of course, Jack recommended me to go shoot this artist, and it just spiraled. Like, it just went crazy. And then opportunities just started coming left and right.
And they're still coming.
Yeah, the reason why they're still coming is because LA keeps expanding and keeps getting exciting and on and on. It's like there's so much growth that's almost like nonstop. And so some of these old clients, some of them sadly pass away, and some of them close down, or this and that. But in the meantime,
it's ever evolving.
Yeah, in the meantime, this evolution of Los Angeles into now what I call the globalization of Los Angeles has kept things exciting and kept business doing well,
So let's talk about, what are some of the artists that you've gone and filmed or visited with? Who's like let's go this way. Who's your all-time favorite if someone says, come to my studio, where you're just like, this is a treat?
Well, there's been a lot of those opportunities that put me on the map.
So name a few.
And early on, around 2010, soon after that breakup I had with that ex-girlfriend, I started reaching out to my artist friends. And one of them was Bradford J. Solomon. And I remember very specifically, he knew I went through a breakup, and he probably thought in his mind I was having a hard time. So he comes and picks me up, takes me to the Americana in Glendale. And I remember we're sitting in front of the Cheesecake Factory, and he tells me, I have an idea. We're going to do a film series together. And so I was already in that mindset of doing films. So he told me that you need to watch these films. So one of them was The Cool School.
Great film.
A great primer on the history of early years of Los Angeles art history. And some other films. Then I watched those. So I quickly learned about the light and space artists in Los Angeles, the California minimalist, the abstract.
Well, which is interesting because that's not his style.
Huh?
It's interesting to say that because he's a completely different style.
These people, like Jack Rutberg and Bradford, and I can name other people, they were a huge influence on me, but I was like steamrolling in my own way. And so at the time, in the fall of 2011, when I was getting my feet very wet into the art scene, was the Pacific Standard Time, the Getty Initiative of the history of Los Angeles artists that essentially, I think, put LA on the map globally in 2011. But I became very fascinated with the light and space artists. And many of them were older at the time. But I was able to, through my own will, get into their studios and allow them to film me, allow me to film them and do these short videos and to gain their trust. And so it was like people like Peter Alexander and Ed Moses and people like Larry Bell and on and on. So once I was filming these artists, Lynn Folks and that crowd, I was able to get my feet into other studios. And so it's kind of interesting to look back at all that, how those opportunities paved the way for more. And so...
And were you doing those just on your own?
So initially it was through the influence of Pacific Standard Time. I was like...
No, but I mean, were you getting paid? Or were you just doing this to get the experience?
Well, I was doing it for the passion and the love of creating this history that no one else was doing.
So you were putting the work in.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, that's all.
I mean, because my point of saying that is I don't think a lot of people realize how much work goes into getting to where you are now. It wasn't like you just decided one day to put up a web page, start photographing or filming and charging people, and therefore you got in every door. Uh-huh. It's a lot more to your story of how much work you've done on your own for the connections, for the opportunity, without going in there with the mindset of it's all about the money.
Exactly. Well, to me, it was more about, I guess nowadays I look at it as for my own personal mental health. It was something that I enjoyed, going into these studios, gaining people's trust. It was also about making a living, but
do you want to go into
in the total amount of work that I do, about 70% of it is service. 30% of it is people hire me, and that creates a way for me to have a living doing this. And also, like when I travel a lot more to other cities, to other countries, and usually these trips are paid for and they lead to other opportunities. So I'm also blowing up outside of LA too. So
you touched on mental health. Do you want to talk about it?
Well, mental health is like something I discovered in the last 5-6 years. And because I was always kind of wondering, why do I even do this? And so then I came to a conclusion as I studied more about mental health issues. This is something that makes me feel good. Like when I go to a gallery or a museum, like my serotonin definitely boosts. It's like this, like it gets to the point where it is an addiction. And
I mean, that's what brought us together as friends. We have the same addiction.
Yeah, and including other relationships that I have of people that have kind of come and gone throughout the last 12, 13 years, So I have friends who are professional artists or professional collectors or committed and engaged to the arts as a patron. So I started just looking at the lowest common denominator out of all of us. And then I came to this conclusion that it is a mental health issue. Also because we're more educated more and more about mental health. So
do you want to talk about how we got through it during COVID?
Well,
I mean, things were essentially locked down.
Well, I think you and I had met like a year before COVID.
We met, 2019.
Yeah. So when COVID started, it was definitely, everyone had their own path and journey through those years. And I was just the kind of person not to sit still and stay at home. That's not who I was. And in that first year of COVID, 2020, I had a friend of mine who essentially lived with me for that year, and he was like-minded, so we would go out a lot, and I would document everywhere I went.
That's also when you started to appreciate street art.
Yeah, I started to document these things, but then there was you, who was coming up to LA. This was the summer of 2020 when the galleries started to open. The museums didn't open until like a year later. But the galleries were allowing us to come in, obviously with a map.
By appointment.
All these protocols, right? So
sometimes they would leave the gallery, let us be in there alone.
But you were the one who would come up at least once a week, and we would pal around and go to as many galleries as possible in a day, anywhere from like 5 to 15 galleries. And that's when I started to transition, because prior to COVID, I was all about the opening. I would see, my experience of going to an art gallery was at an opening. But then when COVID, during the years of COVID, I transitioned from going to art galleries during business hours when no one was there, you know? And so during those years, I just started doing footage and social media and stuff like that in the videos for my YouTube channel more and more and more increasingly. And I don't really care as much about the openings like I used to, nor do I even photograph openings anymore. I'm all more about shooting video, you know, so.
You're more focused on the art, it seems, than the social aspect.
Yeah, those COVID years were just really bizarre.
But we lived.
Not my favorite subject.
We lived through it.
But it was definitely a journey, and a journey for sure.
I think you learned to like some different types of art than you're used to. I've definitely seen your taste evolve a little.
Yeah.
Not your collecting. Your collecting hasn't changed, but what you appreciate out and about is definitely expanded.
More and more you would like pull over at these random places where there's, you know,
you can say
blocks and blocks of graffiti and murals.
That's art
and
too.
So I would hop out of the car too and do these videos, and then that kind of started a new series of these EMS street art videos that I essentially do wherever I travel now.
And we're working on how to photograph it properly.
Yeah.
Like, there is a way. Some of these writers can get a little cranky.
Uh-huh.
If you shoot them wrong and cut off part of their tag or part of their image, it's...
Yeah.
I've gotten slack before of you shot it wrong and like, okay. So Eric, let's talk about putting the work in. Like, you've mentioned it before. You've clearly lived it. What does it mean to you? Like, when you hear younger people trying to get in the art world, trying to get their foot in the door, and I think it's a principle that crosses over to many different disciplines. What does it mean to you?
Well, you need certain things to motivate you, certain principles like discipline and goal setting, and even studying leadership.
I agree. I think the studying is highly overlooked. It's really important.
Reading and educating yourself and looking at people who were before you and what motivated them. In my case, it would be other artists and filmmakers, and even my father, photographer. So those are the type of things that influenced me. And then you one day start picking up books and reading them. This is back in the day when we were actually reading books. And so I would
So how much, sorry to interrupt you, how much time, a week, a month, do you think you put into research? And by research, I just mean like refreshing on reading about artists or watching videos on artists or looking at websites. Like, how much time outside of your own work are you looking into those things?
Well, I think it's a 24/7 thing.
Agreed.
Because I'm surrounded by people who are in the know in different aspects of the art world, who feed me information. That I'm also on email lists of galleries and institutions that I support. And I read certain websites. And I'm definitely a news junkie, so I'm always reading the headlines, whether it's politics or even sports. And so I think ultimately I'm just a very, very worldly person.
Well, you're definitely an information junkie.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So I think people...
Which listen, I think it's funny that you're an information junkie because you can be in a room and say 3 words the whole night, but you really have a lot of knowledge that I don't think everyone would know because you're quiet. Your personality for a stranger might be perceived different than me that knows you, that sits in my car every week. Some days I want to kick you out. Some days I don't. It's always an adventure.
I'm sure there's people who take me out to all these fancy dinners and stuff, and they think I'm rude because I'm on my phone most of the time.
What do you do? No, let's talk about that because it bugs me sometimes too, but I understand. It took me probably, I think I hung out with you for about 1.5 years before I realized, okay, this guy doesn't hate me and he's not with me because I'm just driving. One, you have an addiction.
Uh-huh.
2, you're never not working. You're either scheduling, you're editing.
I'm texting someone, hey, what's going on? Can we stop by?
Yeah.
I'm creating opportunities.
You did that today.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought we were doing nothing. And then
it's just a constant flow of that type of information, of going somewhere and meeting people.
What's the adventure?
Huh?
Let's be honest. There's
a
the high
adventure.
of the adventure. We both like that high.
It's a daily adventure for sure. And so not only am I creating opportunities for myself and the person or the institution that I'm going to, but I'm creating opportunities for the people that are with me. So that's actually one of my skill sets, is that I'm very good at connecting people with each other and promoting people.
You do a great job at that, by the way. I think that you quietly do that more than most people realize, that your introductions can make a big difference. I think everyone should do that, by the way. I'm a big fan of people introducing people to people and just walk away. Just, if you don't need to be there, make the introduction. And then, look, some people roll with it. Some people don't. And we talk about that a lot too, of when we introduce people to people, and some people will use that in a good way. And some people just kind of don't realize what table we just sat them at.
I actually want to go back for a second about, earlier we were talking about the mental health situation regarding myself personally. Well, the newest thing that I've learned recently about myself is empathy. So for me to do what I do, obviously I have empathy and that I care about the things that I do. So that's also a motivation, empathy, which is the new thing that I'm studying and trying to figure out, why do I care? Why do I even care about all this?
Well, when you say empathy, like in what aspect do you mean that?
I think empathy in terms of the artist. Like, what motivates this artist? Why do I care about this artist and what this person does? Because I actually have some kind of empathy towards their soul.
Yeah.
And their motivation, or in terms of an institution, the program, what they're trying to promote, the history, the empathy towards the history. Too many people bitch and moan. They're bitching all the time.
Well, we hear that too much. We hear it too much. Way too much.
This negative. People have all these negative energies that I have to go through.
Well,
But
people
I'm
tell
mostly-
you a lot of things.
But I'm mostly surrounded by a lot of great energies too. And
But I've been with you on days where I don't know the people and the stories we hear.
oh, the hater,
The
there's so many
haters.
the haters.
Oh, the haters.
And then you kind of look at it.
They're bitter.
Let's look at it. Let's be honest. Some of these people don't even like themselves. So that's like the lack of empathy that they have even towards their own life.
Which is fine. Maybe not disclose that to people you don't know as well. Like, have boundaries. I think I've learned over the years that some, usually artists that are strangers to me, don't have great boundaries on their stance on things. I try to melt into the background when I'm not out front, but I hear a lot of things when I'm shadowing you. So I shadow you most of the time.
Well, if we can focus for a second on the negative aspects or the negative energies that I have to go through on a day-to-day basis,
It's a lot.
I deal with artists who aren't satisfied, or artists who want to constantly be validated,
Or galleries.
or institutions. Yeah. Or people who don't like what's happening in LA, the globalization of LA,
We love it.
the opportunities of diversity that's happening in LA, these type of things that these more provincial, old school people were hoping for the demise of LA, which hasn't happened, and I don't think
we hear that. I mean,
I don't think it's going to happen.
Which is weird. You think that, like, why can't you just cheerlead for everyone? Like, why wouldn't you want everyone to succeed?
Yeah,
that's weird.
Well, let's for an example, LACMA, who's going through major reconstruction. There's a lot of these old provincial LA people who don't like that change, whereas I look at it as something that's kind of cool. It makes the place more interesting to photograph and video. And ironically, the design of this LACMA is going back to mid-century, so it's not really like this.
So it's paying respect.
Yeah, but there's just people that don't like what's happening in LA, because the fact is that LA is changing.
I hope so.
And,
I hope
and
it's
the
changing.
change is affecting places that I like to visit, like Palm Springs and Las Vegas and stuff like that.
Well, I don't think change is a bad thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, what's happening everywhere in the world is modernizing.
Well, it always has.
And every building, every museum, we're in this age of star architecture. They want their star architect to make and design this building, and typically these architects are from a different country, and they're not local, so that pisses them off too, But look at the old LACMA building. It was just a boring government building.
Oh, I still loved it.
Well, yeah.
And I get it. I get
I didn't
like,
grow up here either.
So I started going there in college.
Yeah.
And I've never stopped. My first membership was in college, which is crazy to think of. And it does. I'm a little sad that it's going to be a new building, but I also am excited because, look, at the end of the day, things need to change. I don't want to buy art from an artist who's doing the same painting they were doing 15 years ago. If we want the art to evolve, we need the museums to evolve. We're all evolving. I hope that I evolve. You definitely have.
Well, I just look at it as where we're headed in places like the Lucas Museum.
Oh, that's going to be
cool. That looks like an actual spaceship.
That's great. It's going to be
amazing. Any museum that's being built nowadays, it doesn't matter if it's in the South or anywhere in the world. It's just going to have some star architects going to come in and build it.
Oh.
And the idea is because it resonates with younger crowd, and it's Instagrammable.
They need they need the foots. They need the feet through the door. They need the numbers.
Like today, we were at the Orange County Museum of Art, the new museum. It's like chaos. That architecture is complete chaos, but it looks amazing when you video it.
Photographs, wow.
Yeah, it's just that's just the way it is.
Do they, as far as hanging art, that's a whole nother conversation. But let's go back to mental health.
Yeah.
Let's go from Orange County to mental health. Sounds fitting. So you mentioned that you go and you visit these places and it helps with your mental health. And I agree. I need that. I call it, when I see good art, my eyes dilate.
Yeah.
Like, I know, like, a good day, my eyes have dilated. A bad day, not as bad, but, we look at everything. We look at what could be considered, in our own opinion, good art, bad art, but we see it all. But when we talk about mental health, I think there's more to it than just, do we feel good? Do we not feel good? And there's different personalities that go with that. I think that, my opinion, and I hope I don't offend you, I think that you have a different personality outside of mental health that makes you successful in what you do. And if you don't mind, I'm gonna talk about it a little as a friend that spends a lot of time with you. I know, I see your face. You have a very concentrated vision when you're working, and I have a few friends like you that have the same thing. I wouldn't necessarily say you're on the spectrum. I don't think you're clinically on a spectrum, but as a friend, your level of concentration is that of, I've not seen in a lot of people. So, on this side, we might like joke and say, like, maybe you're being spectrumy, but I'm not saying that you are. I'm not a doctor. But there is some type of, like, don't laugh at me because I see you laughing. There is some type of superhero personal attribute you have that allows you to focus in a way that I've never seen anyone focus. So you can be in the middle of 100 people, and I don't think you know anyone else is in the room. I think when you're filming or taking photographs, I don't think that you, am I wrong? I mean, I think you are so tunnel vision that I think at times you're so into your photographing or filming that I don't even know if you realize that there's someone standing next to you. And I think sometimes that might be misconstrued, that you're either quiet, shy, whatever it is, because you're not communicating. What do you think?
Well, the reason why I was making those faces, because I look back at 10 years ago or so, even beyond, when I had ex-girlfriends, they would tell me that they thought I was autistic,
that's not a bad thing.
Or some people said I had ADD, which I don't believe, because I'm super goal oriented.
Yeah, you're not ADD.
And so then it was not until a few years ago I actually asked my sister, who studies a lot of psychology. She said that I was high functioning. So I started learning more about high functioning.
You're definitely high functioning.
Yeah. And so,
because, and here's why I say, and I don't, I love you to death. You're very high functioning, but sometimes your social skills are different than others.
I think that I maybe have borderline Tourette's.
You do not have Tourette's.
Well, I don't.
You don't
go
have
off
Tourette's.
On you. I've never gone off on you, but
Not
I do
yet.
go off on people. And I kind of
I don't
as
think,
humor.
But I don't think it's Tourette's. I know what you mean, because I'm around you enough to know what you mean when you say that. I don't think you have Tourette's. I think it goes back to your tunnel vision and when you get stuck on things. So whether that's stuck on editing, what's stuck on getting the best image at that moment, you have that click. And once you're kind of in that realm, it's like a dog with a bone.
I have this kind of uncanny ability to multitask. It's almost the best way to describe it in film language is like I'm in the Matrix.
Eric, you are in your Matrix.
So I'm like in this. So I've actually studied Zen philosophy. So I'm able to clear my mind and be in this other world. Even when I'm at home, I have two 30-inch screens in front of me.
And your computer.
And then I have a laptop to the side. And I have my iPhone in my hand. And then
and your desktop.
That, I have two flat screen TVs mounted to the wall, where on one TV I'm watching movies, and on the other TV I'm watching other movies. So I can literally watch two movies at once. So
that's not normal.
So that's like my world. Oh, and nowadays I have an Echo right in front of my computer where it's playing some Hawaiian music.
While you're watching films.
Or I'm getting like let's see baseball highlights. So I'm just absorbing stimuli, information. I think that's what the addiction is the stimulation, whether it's all this data all this data that I'm
accumulating
and then transferring into footage. So that's also why I need to take breaks and I go out into nature.
You do.
I go on a nature drive or nature trips. I would much rather nowadays go on a road trip than fly somewhere.
Well, you like the macabre and...
Yeah. And if I do fly somewhere, I have to get a window seat. Because I'm like...
you're going to take pictures.
Well, I'm that. And I'm the guy who's looking out the window, just amazed that I'm seeing these views from an airplane.
Well, we all know there's nowhere worse to take you than a place where they don't allow pictures. Yeah. You hate Soho House. I can't even take you there. No camera. You can't go to galleries where they say no photos. You can't go anywhere.
The worst all-time experience ever was last year. I went with a friend to Marfa, and we did the tour there, and it was 6 hours. A 6-hour docent tour that was kind of broken up into 2-3 hours, but they didn't allow me to do any video or photos this is at the Judd Foundation. And so what I did was I pretended to be on my iPhone, but I was photographing the floors because the floor, all the different exhibition spaces, the floors are very unique. So I did a whole photo series on
That's why we love you.
On the Judd Foundation floors.
Where's the book on that?
Because in many gallery exhibition spaces, just look at the roof, the ceiling, or the floor, and they're very interesting.
Highly overlooked.
Yeah.
And to think some gallery director put a lot of time into that. It's kind of funny. So let's talk institutions. We got a lot in LA. Got a lot of institutions. Do you have a favorite?
Well, when I say institution or institutional art, what I'm thinking about are museums, nonprofits, art colleges, universities.
Okay,
to me, that's
you're blanket over all of them.
To me, that's like the elite art world. That's where like the history is being made.
Well, the history has been made.
Yeah.
I like to think that we're still living in a realm where history is being made.
Well, yeah. Well, in some ways, I'm creating a history. So.
Well, that's its own story. So let's talk about that. How many videos have you produced that are on YouTube, not are sitting on your hard drive? How many videos do you have on YouTube? Not your Instagram, because I'm not touching your Instagram. That's my feeling.
Over 3,000
on YouTube.
Yeah, but actually on my Instagram, which someone actually pointed out to me recently. Let me see. I have 14.2 thousand posts.
Are you crazy?
That's what it says right here. 14.2.
So that's what addiction looks like. I'm glad you don't do drugs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm posting at this point 3 to 4 reels a day.
All right.
Which is
Wait, is that on YouTube? We're not talking
Instagram.
Okay, no, let's just talk YouTube. Okay. Like Instagram is like that's. Look, we'll get into you wearing short shorts and posting that later. But let's go to your YouTube, which is your actual YouTube space where I believe you have more viewers that are international than you have local, correct?
So I'm on my YouTube page.
But wait, you have more international viewers than local for YouTube. Is that true?
Well, I currently have 4.5 thousand videos on my YouTube channel. That goes back to my...
We'll put a link to that.
That goes back to my measly little 200 music videos.
Okay.
That initially started.
Are those 200 videos on YouTube? The music videos?
Yeah, a lot of them, yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, so...
So you got a lot.
It's a machine. I don't know where this comes from, but it's this crazy machine.
Do you ever surprise yourself when you see your numbers?
Yeah, it's boggling. Yeah, for sure.
And are you ever surprised when you see the view counts on some of them? Because I'm surprised. Like, how do people even find your YouTube? Like, how has that evolved to the point of where it is now? Because what is the highest count on one of your videos? You've got like some with at least 1 million.
Yeah,
views.
yeah. There's a few and hundreds, 500,000. There are those.
That's and a lot of those videos are older videos. So it's not like you just now posted it in the time of everyone's doing social media or has a YouTube channel or just that. These are older videos with a ton of views.
So I don't know how that really works, but there is definitely a global audience out there. One thing that I do know is that LA people tend to have a short attention span.
True. And
so, an example, if I post like a 30-minute film or a 60-minute film, they get a lot of views than maybe a short 3-minute film, because people around the world have longer or normal attention spans, and they're happy to watch these longer videos.
And is that because it's LA based, do you think?
I just think it's the culture of LA, where it's just like people have short attention spans.
And you know this from your analytics, I'm guessing?
I just know this from my intuition throughout the 10 years. And also based on my own postings of what gets seen and what gets less seen,
So what's your highest seen video?
Well, that's this video I did on James Austin Murray, which was part of the series I do called the Atelier series. And it's just, I've done maybe 15 of these, and they're just like these videos that range from 30 minutes to an hour, and they're just me standing back like a fly on the wall and filming an artist doing the work as an observer across the room.
So like a fly on the wall.
Yeah. And some of them don't have much editing.
Yeah, the sound's great.
I might just... Yeah, and there's usually no music.
Yeah, I like the no music.
Sometimes there's music because the artist listens to music while they're doing the art, and I'm not in the place to tell this particular artist to turn their music off. And so anyways. So I got to put some kind of other music other than outside of their commercial music.
Has there ever been an artist you were nervous to film?
Not necessarily. It's definitely more of an excitement.
Okay, then let's go that way. What artist were you most excited to film? Like, you knew this was a moment. Like, this is important.
Well, a lot of those elderly light and space artists, for sure, in the early days. You got to remember, since I was 16, I was doing high school photojournalism and photojournalism in college. So I was like in the front lines. I was always used to being there on the sideline of a sporting events and stuff, or crouched down in the media section at an event. So I already have that confidence. So it's not like I'm really nervous. It's more like I'm excited because of the opportunity. I do get more shy, like usually when there's an artist where I perceive of a certain stature, I get more quieter.
Okay, that makes sense.
And I think that's also out of
But I think that's
being reverent.
But I think that's, I've shadowed you for quite a few years now. I think that you're, I've learned to be quiet, or I try to be as quiet as I can when I go with you. But I think your sense of quiet, and it's not about you going into these studios, is what has been, it's made you be able to capture these artists, because it's, I've gone with other people to places and they want to tell the artist their whole journey, their story of like, oh, why are we here? We're not here for us. And I think you're really, really good at just almost being invisible while you're filming.
Well, when you look at when you study my films, I'm never in my films.
Yeah.
Or my voice is never in I'm not like a documentary filmmaker where I'm part of the film or even narrating a film.
No. Not at all. But I think but when you're filming, as I've watched, you're very disarming because you're not having a dialogue with the artist. You'll ask a very simple question, back up, and say go. Well, you say action, but you know.
Well, the fact of the matter is that artists do vet me.
Well, we all vet each other, or they should.
So
they should.
They're asking their friends or other, hey, what's up with this guy coming into my studio? And so I think some of the feedback is, let him in your studio. It's almost like he's invisible.
You are invisible.
Yeah.
And
so I think that's part of, I guess the mystique of me coming to the studio and filming.
Well, that and I've never seen you take advantage of an artist. You're not really monetizing off your time there. Yeah. If anything, you're giving your time, and your time could be somewhere else earning money, but instead you're addicted. You can't help yourself, and so you go to every opportunity.
Yeah.
So let's talk. My favorite. Let's talk emerging artists.
Okay.
What are you're now going to more and more of their studios. You when I met you, you were more traditional artists, career artists, correct? Mm-hmm. And we were diversifying that. You bring me to the, let's just say for lack of better, some blue chip artists, and I bring you to some emerging artists. Uh-huh. What advice do you have for emerging artists? Because you've been around a lot of these grandfathers and people we highly respect, and they've put their time in, and they've feast and famine. What's your advice for kids?
Well, I think ultimately it goes to how do you conduct yourself as a professional artist. A professional artist is someone who makes a living doing their art. It's full-time. There's no side job. For women, I understand sometimes they have a husband and kids they have to deal with. And also for husbands, the reverse situation. I understand that the idea of a family.
It's stressful.
And I think that there are a lot of things they don't teach you in art school, like social media habits and things like that. I think an artist should have a more professional social media presence and have the kids and family and pets on a separate page.
That's something a lot of people don't want to talk about.
I think
we don't want to see your cat.
I think your Instagram, I only talk about Instagram, but that's the only relevant thing that I...
Well, because it's quick and easy. We can look at someone's Instagram. It should be a very
quick read on your art. And you can always have a second page that's more of whatever.
Well, look, art's image. Yeah. Art is images. And we look at images all day, every day, whether it's on a wall or on our phone. I want to go into a gallery. I want to see art on the wall. I don't want to see pictures of their family on the wall. And that's when I go to Instagram to look at an artist.
Or the kids.
Yeah,
and the pets.
If I go in a gallery, I just want to see the art. If I go to your professional art Instagram, I really don't care what you had for dinner.
Well, also a lot of my friends and people that I associate with are art dealers.
Yeah.
So I know how they think.
Yeah.
And so there are times where I'm like, hey, check out this artist. And they go to the artist page out of respect for me. Yeah. And they want the quick read.
Yeah. I'm the same.
And
I'm done after like 3 lines and I've got like 2 dogs, a cat, and a kid. Uh-huh. I'm out. Your art could be amazing. I just I'm going to go on to the next. I'm going to find someone out of state.
Now, I think it's important for an artist to hire a publicist.
Yeah, that's a whole nother... and we'll have a publicist on soon.
And
I think they're important too. If you want this as a career.
And I think that's
a whole different topic.
And I think if an artist has a relationship with an art dealer, they should keep that very close to the vest.
Don't burn bridges.
And don't start bringing your friends to introduce to this art dealer. Just keep it one-on-one.
Oh no! See, I think unless the dealer asks, because for a group show, you're gonna bring your friends in.
The artist should have a lot of respect for the dealer.
Well, you know me. I highly respect dealers because without dealers, we don't have working artists in our realm.
Dealers are very wound up people, so you should not annoy the dealer. And dealers can probably get annoyed very easily.
They're brokers.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, it's a retail world. You're selling your art as a retail item. You need a retail space for it to sit in, and that's going to be the broker or the dealer. It just, if you want to do it on your own, do it on your own. If you're going to go into a gallery, respect the gallery. They're paying the rent on that building. They have staff. You know, I roll my eyes when someone complains of, oh, I had to split with the gallery. All right, well then open your own.
I think there's a lot of advice that can be given to artists, but if I give advice, it will definitely come across as mean.
Yeah.
So I'll leave that to Jerry. I'll leave it to Jerry Saltz. He can do all that advice.
I do like when he says, form a gang, form a gang, form a gang. Like the kids I see doing the best are ones that work together. They have 4 or 5 artists working together and they help each other out. Form a gang.
Yeah.
It's my favorite term. Form a gang. Be each other's publicists if you have to, but form a gang. Figure it out. But these lone wolves, I don't know how they do it.
But for the most part, I see in the evolution of social media, which is happening very fast, I'm seeing a lot of great Instagrams. And I'm seeing Instagrams that are being cleaned up.
Well,
yeah.
You know me, I'm searching across the nation all the time of like, Sunday night I'm bored. I'm on Instagram and I will just type in a region and some keywords and start looking at art because I have to look at art. And I've found a few good things.
Uh-huh.
But, as we know, or I know, you've got to look at 1,000 things that don't resonate with you to find the one that does.
Yeah.
So what's your next move, Eric? What are we doing next?
Well, I think I'm going to graduate from the 3-inch inseam shorts to Speedos.
Okay, let's talk about that. Okay, I give you a hard time. What the heck is up with the short shorts? I want to know. You wear a lot of glitter, not as much as you used to. You don't. I think the first few months I met you in the spring, and that fall we were at Super Chief for their October show, and I picked you up, and you were in a blue jumpsuit. I see you cringing. You're in a blue jumpsuit, a wig, and had glitter on. What was going on then?
Was it Halloweenish?
Yeah, it was a Halloween. Yeah, but I mean, Eric, it was
Well, I think that's part of me just letting loose and being a character.
So you are.
I've always been a character, even as a kid.
You're still a character.
Yeah.
You like the costume.
Yeah, but I've also become much more refined and understand fashion.
Yeah.
We do that thing. What would Tom Ford do?
Well, you're learning that your outfits may affect how people speak to you.
Well, also, I'm hanging out with people who have more class and fashion sense, and I do think that's important. For decades and decades, I was wearing the Gap cargo shorts that went down to your knees with the side pockets. Wow. And then I shed all that. I'm very much into circulation in the body, so I just like the shorts that give you more circulation.
But do you like the short shorts because it's a little bit of a rebellion?
Well, that, and also, let's be honest, it's a little sexy.
Is it?
I get a lot of feedback. I probably get a lot of annoying feedback, but the guys like it. There are guys.
Oh, I'm sure the guys.
But
oh my God.
Also, it's me. I love the retro 70s, and
it worked for Tom Selleck,
like
right?
All those basketball players are wearing short shorts, and I think that was cool. And I think ultimately, I always wanted to be an old school tennis player.
Oh, all right.
There's all these different factors that weigh into this.
Well, you've talked about that. Like you like the yacht look.
Yeah.
You like the yacht look. I mean, you are recording in Newport right now.
Ultimately, I like the beach look.
Okay.
Like, that's the reason why I even ended up in California, because my love for beaches and water. and Mediterranean climate. That's a whole other thing.
No, that definitely is a whole different thing.
But yeah, that's...
So let's go back to the youth, because I think everyone older has already like figured out their avenue or their lane. What more can we talk about when it comes to these? You know, I say this because, you know, my passion is more for the kids. You know,
right.
I'll never worry about having a blue chip collection or anything fancy. I just like what I like, and I like the kids. I like their energy. I think LA is on fire with the kids. The kids are on fire. We're being copied. And I mean, maybe they're being copied. Maybe they're copying. I don't know. It's all I've traveled to other places, and I always come back to LA and go, it's here.
Uh-huh.
What's your opinion on that?
Well, art history is all about generations and decades and centuries and epics, stuff like that. So I'm only here at a certain period, and life just keeps evolving, and there's new youth, new generations of people, and times or attitudes are changing, and there's definitely, like when you say youth, we're talking teenagers?
No, I mean young artists. Yeah, like just getting into the market artists.
Yeah.
Like just had their first group show. In fact, maybe let's just stop a sec. Let's talk about group shows.
Okay.
So, you know, we see them at, let's talk LA level. We see them at LA Louvre. Did I say it right?
Yeah.
No, I never know.
That's right.
We see them from there. We see them at basically everywhere now as a group show. And are there pros and cons to that, in your opinion, or what do you think?
Well, I think group shows are necessary at different levels. I think galleries at the LA Louvre level and beyond have group shows so they can test the waters of certain artists and bring in a group of a bunch of MFA artists and have a great ensemble of artists that go well together and have something what you would describe simply as cool, you know. And then you have this other group of group shows that are, I call them kind of self-serving group shows, where you have professional artists who show their friends. Yeah. That's a whole other circuit, you know.
But I mean that when you say friends, that's
or colleagues. You know.
Colleagues. I think that I know what you're talking about, and I don't know how to nicely like finish that topic.
It's just part of the art world.
Well, it's part of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And I think that anyone that's gone to shows knows what we mean by that.
I think that if I was a full-time artist making tangible art, and I was and I couldn't get into art galleries, that would be the natural thing to do. It's
a great way around it.
Is to become a curator. That's the thing. Is people becoming curators, artists becoming curators. And so I can anoint myself as a curator and then start having my artist friends in them.
Have you been asked to curate?
Well, I've curated, but I've become kind of cynical at this. Yeah. So these shows that I've done in the last few years, I just call them friends of EMS. I don't say curated by EMS.
Right.
I call them the friends of EMS. Let's just be what it is.
Yeah. No, I've been asked to curate, and I just think it's weird because I highly respect curators, and it's so much work and it's so much going on that I have no right to do that. I did not earn my way. I just think that let curators be curators.
I think this is like a phenomenon of the last 10, 15 years. Of the self-anointed curator.
It's just bizarre to me.
When I look at a curator, I think of the curator who has a double PhD at the Getty.
Or knows something about working with the artists, working with the galleries, understanding the numbers that go behind it, understanding, as we all know, we both know, my biggest pet peeve, get your PDF done before the show opens. I mean, there's these little things that are really on the curator's job to do. That just because someone knows someone or is an artist that knows someone does not, in my book, deem them ready to curate. Maybe work under someone a few years to learn to make it seamless. But these like hiccups in these gallery shows where it's a guest curator and you can't get information, you can't get a price list it's just a train wreck. It frustrates me. As a buyer, it frustrates me.
Well, in a place like Los Angeles or even New York, the bigger art cities where not everyone knows each other, you have like 1 million art galleries.
But here's the thing.
Of different kinds, and then you have 1 billion artists.
But here's the thing. I'm coming from Orange County, and I had to do a ton of work to figure out the LA art scene. And I like to always go back to that point of, if I have a friend from Orange County that wants to go to LA and buy art, if the gallery's not making it simple, or the guest curator or the curator, then it's kind of a train wreck. Like, I've had so many friends down here go, how do I buy art in LA? Uh-huh. And I tell them, and then they don't get a response, or they can't get a PDF, or... I get that some of the galleries have their patrons. They don't need us. They don't need other buyers. But the fact that some of them don't even respond to emails blows me away.
Well, some of these galleries I think you're alluding to, or have their already built-in collectors, or they're trying to manage the sales.
Managing it, which I get it. I've tried to buy art at certain galleries, and I could afford the piece, and they don't respond to me, like zero. And then I get these comments, because I live down here all the time, of how do I even buy art up there? Because no one will respond to me. And then I'm up there, and they're like, we hate Orange County. They have no taste in art, and they don't buy art, and they're horrible. Everyone in Orange County just wants like beach art. And it's like, no, they want art. It's completely not accessible to my friends down here, which is a whole nother conversation. But
well, it all goes back to elitism.
But I mean, or geography of like, I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet. It still behooves me of friends that have horrible art in their house, and they want good art, and they can't get it. That's a whole nother day. But.
Well, in my early days of covering art, I would hang out with or associate with these art dealers, and they would tell me their stories of like some guy would walk into the gallery, a very wealthy rocker, for example, ex-rock star would walk in inquiring about a piece, and then the dealer's like telling me, well, I don't want this person to have this piece. Like I learned that from our early days.
That's insane. Yeah. To me, that's insane. Yeah. I mean, I get that. I get the jockeying of art of like, okay, we want to be in a museum and we want to be in a certain collector's thing because they'll donate it to the museum because, let's be honest, that's how you're either going to show in a museum via your gallery and then hope that somebody buys it for the museum that's involved with the museum, or, whatever it takes. But it just blows my mind that these galleries will not sell to people outside their realm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know a few that will. I know some that will, that are hustling, and they do a great job, and they're disruptive, and I love it. They're breaking all the rules.
Okay, cool. So,
wrapping it up.
Well, it's good talking to you.
Wrapping it up.
I'm going to go get off this and check the sports scores and the current headlines. And
what you're going to do
work
is
on my reels.
You're going to go,
tag like literally 20 people.
No, probably 30, 40.
And then go detox. We're going to walk down to the beach, right?
Yeah, we're not going to the beach. All right, Eric, it's been great. Thank you for your time. I have your time all week, every week, but thank you for today. And we'll talk to you again soon.
It was a pleasure.